Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of Ekoji, Ekoji Buddhist Temples podcast. My name is Rich Wolford and I'm your host today. We are joined today by Joran Stegner and he will share his personal experiences with Buddhism and Ekoji. All right, quick background introduction to Joran. Been a Sangha member since 2015. Lives in Springfield with his wife Ann. Works as an IT engineer and originally from Montana.
Thank you, Rich. It's great to be here.
Welcome, Joran. How did you find Ekoji?
Interesting story. It was through my wife, Ann. She's a religious studies professor at Northern Virginia Community College in Annandale. And for about 3 or 4 years, she'd been sending students here to write experience papers on Buddhism. So it turned out that one March afternoon on a Sunday, she said, "Hey, I'm going to go to Ekoji. It's this Shin Buddhist temple nearby our house, about 10 minutes away, and I wondered if you wanted to come with me." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know." She's like, "Oh, come on, it won't be a big deal. I'm just going in to thank them for hosting my students for the past couple of years." So, like many people, I see this temple as we're pulling up, and I'm a little nervous if I'm going to feel out of place or not, because I haven't been in a temple before. And I came in the door, and immediately people were greeting me. They were nice. They were welcoming. And she said, "Let's stay for the service, and then we'll talk to the minister afterwards." So I sat down, and I just started listening, and I really liked the process and how the service was run. I liked the message. At the time, Reverend Rai was presiding over the temple. And she spoke to him afterwards. I spoke to him a little bit. I spoke to Ken. I spoke to a couple other people who've been around forever. And I just felt this instant welcome. And I never looked back. I started coming from then forward. And then 6 months later, we became members.
Wow. That's terrific. And thank you, Ann. Did you come from another faith?
I did do some self-exploration, not from my parents. My parents were very, in a sense, they did raise us in Buddhism. I mean, they kind of had Zen thought in their parenting. Nice. They were New Age and believed in a lot of spiritual things, not so much the religious side of it. But I explored Christianity when I was in high school and college and kind of went away from it after a while. Didn't get all my questions answered. But I've always thought in sort of a Buddhist mindset, I believe. So that's why this place resonated with me, because they were kind of telling me things that I'd been thinking about in a more formalized way.
All right. So it sounds like maybe, you're not so much a convert, but someone who discovered the path of the Dharma and you're following it. Mm-hmm. So, and then that's an interesting dynamic for a lot of folks, because it seems like it's a 50-50 thing. There's some who just didn't have a spiritual path and are looking for one, and one who is on one that's dissatisfied. So it's interesting. Right. So you would fall into I sort of had one that was very similar to this. Right. And you think this is sort of refined it, or?
Absolutely. Yeah. Kind of just a better definition of what I seem to have kind of followed through my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you've had I think you've been already in your time here in a number of great leadership and volunteer positions. I would like to just kind of get your point of view of how that's helped you, or learn more about the temple and to be what it really means to be a Sangha member, because I think the two are entwined. Right? So you were co-president in 2017 along with Stu Ott. How was that experience?
It was interesting. It was the other side of the veil, so to speak, because when you're sitting here and you're listening to the Dharma, you're set back a ways. You feel connected when there's chanting, or when you come up to the Naijin. There's definitely this feeling of connection, but you're still kind of safe in your bubble, and you're around others who are safe in their bubbles.
So true.
But you pass through that when you go into a leadership role. You see the background elements of the temple. You see how the money flow works. You see how the planning works for education, for moving forward, where you see the temple going from there. It can be frustrating. Board meetings are very long, but they're usually they bear fruit.
Yes.
They definitely talk about, here's what we have to deal with, here's where we want to go. and being president, there was a striking sense of power, but it was kind of tamped down because everyone had to agree, and you weren't thinking about what would be best for you. You were thinking about what would be best for the Sangha.
Yeah, and I think that's a fascinating thing because to be a Sangha member, I think you're all in. You can't you can do whatever you like, but you often you have a role as a Sangha member to help the temple work, and it relates, I think, directly to. If you would agree with this whole notion of dana, right? A lot of people think of that's money, but as someone who served in leadership, you would probably say it's time.
It's time.
It's volunteers, service. Right? It's service. It's a great perspective, I think.
Right. Money keeps the lights on, but dana is what keeps the temple
alive. Yeah, terrific. And then you were also on the religious studies committee, and that was what was involved with that?
That was interesting. That was we were planning to increase the educational output of the temple, give people an opportunity to talk beyond just hearing the Dharma and wanting to communicate. It began kind of slowly. I believe it ebbed and flowed before I came, but with Ken's leadership, it led us to first just the Dharma discussions. That's kind of how we started. We were kind of feeling it out.
Oh, yeah.
We knew we had Buddhism 101, so that was a lot of people's entry in was to get a basic understanding of what Buddhism is, what Shin Buddhism is, specifically by the end. And that was good, but we wanted to add some more. So we, with Anne's help and others, we created a Buddhist study group. And that one was very focused, Dharma focused. We were reading periodicals and stories and books, and it was a little bit intense. And some people, I think, were they were happy to be there, but at the same time, they'd step through the door, but they weren't quite ready to offer up their opinions or thoughts. And as that progressed, various people took over. I have 3-year-old Gemma, and so during this period, Anne has stepped forward, or I've stepped forward based on childcare reasons. But during the pandemic, it changed further, and now it's a Buddhism movie discussion.
Oh yeah. That's a neat twist because it's less intimidating. It's more everyday, and it's certainly you don't have to be schooled in a sutra to look at a movie and see how it might relate to the Dharma. Right? That's a really neat idea.
Bring whatever knowledge you have of Buddhism to task to have a great discussion.
Yeah.
And you don't have to necessarily see all the Buddhist elements because someone else will fill in maybe something you missed. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a documentary about Buddhism. It could be The Matrix or Groundhog Day or something that has all the elements of what we're teaching here and putting it in a sometimes in a fictional way into a way that people can consume, that they can understand. Because most people hear the Dharma, but they ask, what can the Dharma do for me and how can I live it in my daily life?
Right.
And movies can help that as well as discussion.
Yeah, they're parables too, right? Well, one of the things you helped us with so much this year in August was our music and art fundraiser, where we got folks to, with your leadership and instruction, to fold paper cranes. I think we folded over 1,000, and we're using that as a donation mechanism and raised a good chunk of money. So thanks for that. But I was really interested in your pursuit of origami and how that might overlap or relate to Buddhism spiritually.
Absolutely. It's always been kind of meditative for me. It puts me in the moment and allows me to see moment by moment who I am. It's dana in a sense that I'm putting my time into it and then trying to gift it and expand people's horizons with it. I challenge myself with complexity. They make great gifts. I can't really sell it because I can't put a price on my time, so I simply offer the time, and that's why it was so powerful and meaningful for me to give to the temple in that way.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think that has very much. There's a lot of in Buddhism about meditatively or contemplatively or both when you do an action. It could be sweeping It could be something that some people would call mindless, but what it really is it's sort of freeing your mind and emptying your mind while you do it. I can imagine that the detail of origami would allow you to kind of push out the day
Exactly.
and let other things come in. That's really neat.
When it can't, of course, then the origami can't occur at that moment. But by pushing myself into it, I find that sometimes that can allow a release and a letting go of stressors or issues in the world, and I can focus in on that moment.
Oh, that's terrific. Often we like to ask people, any challenges that you've faced, in terms of, literally becoming a Buddhist, and it could be culturally, family, it could be struggling to learn and understand, just sort of things that you can share with folks about things you had to either overcome or move aside. Or
Yes, that is something that a lot of people find when they come here, especially if they're coming from another organized religion. Any similarities to a religion that they may have felt they're moving past can sometimes trigger issues, as in they say, oh, they're singing the gathas, that seems like singing hymns, and they start to automatically make a correlation and say, why is this seemingly the same structure as a Christian service? But really, structure is traditional. There's definite tradition that comes down through Buddhism as it's come from the Japanese origin, specifically for this temple. But it's how it's been brought to the West where the correlations end up coming in, because a lot of the text has been translated by Christian missionaries, for instance. There's been overlaps with other faiths trying to introduce faiths to people that are not necessarily direct from Japan and their descendants. But as far as if it caused any conflict, like in my life, I think a lot of my family and friends were excited to hear about it. They were fascinated. They wanted to know the difference between Zen Buddhism and Shin Buddhism. My most common reaction when I tell someone I'm Buddhist is like, "You're white, you can't be Buddhist." so they're making assumptions, and all I try to do is show it in my actions,
right?
Because they say the best Buddhists don't have to tell you they're Buddhists; they simply have to live the Buddhist life.
I think I share something similar. You get to know people, you want to share things that are in your life with them. So eventually, as I get to know people, whether it's just casually work, neighbors, it'll come up, that I'm a Buddhist. And it's an interesting thing. You generally find people kind of like, what is that? Like, they're very curious, and they're also not very educated. And so as a result, they tend to want to, so tell me more. Do you get the same reaction?
And there's a very distinct opinions about it. They'll say, oh, that's not really a religion, it's more of a spiritual way of living. And
because there's not a God per se.
Yeah. But when you really dig into the meat of all religions, which I have the benefit of doing, living with a PhD in religious studies, you find that all religions have correlation. And what we call, Amida Buddha could very well be a different way of describing the same thing.
Right.
As they say in the Dharma, 80,000 people pointing at the moon. Everyone has a different perspective, but it's still one connected whole. So I wouldn't say that we have a God any less than I would deny another religion.
Right. And that even a spiritual path is considered a religion for sure. That's a great point you bring up, because when I used to be more involved in the temple in a different way, we used to host a lot of visitors, Boy Scouts, private schools who were just trying to give, or even private schools that were religious, whether they were Christian or Jewish or something, and they would come. And by the end of the visit, almost the adult chaperones and the children, we'd always come away with, gosh, when you just boil it all down, it doesn't seem that different. We have this ritual and this tradition and this focal point, but we're all about love, we're about togetherness, we're about compassion. I was always struck by that as as something that ties us, no matter what the religion is. When you think of ways that, one of the things I think is really important for folks who come here and for our Sangha, I think the health and growth of our Sangha certainly starts with learning and, becoming, good Shin Buddhists or whatever the term is. But it's really how that becomes internalized and realized in your life. That, I think hopefully you'll see people, become fulfilled, become happy, become wise and compassionate. So how has Buddhism positively affected your life, especially since becoming a Sangha member?
Well, as I said, I had kind of an unstructured and investigative experience trying to find out more of how the universe worked. I have a very analytical mind, and religion was always a roadblock because taking anything on faith takes a huge leap, because you have to say, well, I'm not going to be able to look too much further into this, because there comes a point where you just have to go forward.
Facts are not helping.
Right. And Buddhism has something similar in that there's such a thing as the unknowable.
Yeah.
And we're not meant to know, because we're not in this very particular position as incarnate beings. We're not really meant to know how everything works. So you could say that's taking something on faith. But at the same time, there's never any one telling you not to continue researching and looking into all the facets and learn as much as you can, which always drew me to Buddhism. Because there's not one text, there's not 100 texts, there's 1,000 texts from thousands of years, and it continues to develop. We're not just following something that the Shakyamuni Buddha, the original living Buddha, taught us. We are going through interpretation, advancement. Our particular sect comes out of a man's personal, Shinran Shonin's personal experience and how he felt that Buddhism should be offered to the common man, taking it out of the monasteries and giving it to the people. So that's a big deal. That's important.
I think that reminds me of two things. One is I think that you raise a really good point. Is I think we used to chant the Bodhisattva vows here, and one of them is I will learn each lessons of the Dharma until I am free of ignorance, which is sort of like, to your point, is it's an infinite trail.
Right.
And I think that's a huge part of being a Buddhist. Is it feels like to me, I don't know if you agree, is you're a constant learner.
Absolutely. You're striving, and it's about the journey more than it is about getting all the answers and being complete. I mean, if we could reach enlightenment, obviously that is the end goal, but we may spend all of this lifetime trying to get closer to it.
Right.
That's the important part.
Yeah. And as you think about like your daily life with your family or your work and certain situations, has Buddhism, brought you something that's made you a better person or a better, person on the job, or a better family man, or just...
What it's done is allowed me in moments when I can capture my calm and I can think through issues. I tend to try to come from a place of compassion. No one succeeds every day. Sometimes it's even only a few times a day you're able to do it. But each time you do, each time you don't respond with anger, or you think first and let something go when the other person is directing anger towards you, whether it's your child or your coworker. There's been plenty of times where people will say, I don't think you're really Buddhist because you just yelled at me. And I'm like, well, everybody goes through this. It's a striving for this enlightened state. I don't have all the answers right now, and I can't put them in place in every moment of the day. But the point is, I'm thinking about them, and I have a very firm structural belief of where I should be. Yes. And that's the guidance that I was seeking when I came here.
Yeah, and that now you have a way of structuring, like you said, and it kind of resides often at the forefront of your brain, and you're much more likely to catch yourself.
Right.
Yeah, one of the people we interviewed and has been on, one of my mentors, Gordon Vermont, shared a great story where he was president of the BCA, the Buddhist Churches of America, and very contentious board meetings and lots at stake and lots of egos, quite frankly.
Absolutely.
And he was sharing the story on a plane, and he was talking about the stress and the sort of how to resolve all these things. And the guy's like, I thought you guys were Buddhists, and he didn't feel anything. He goes, we're humans,
right,
and we feel it all: anger, jealousy, resentment, frustration. It's and he went on to say, it's what we do with that. It's not that we don't feel it on the front end. It's what we do with it on the back end,
Absolutely.
And it was a great thing. It reminded me when you said that, it reminded me of that story. Like you tell someone you're a Buddhist, they're like, they sort of hold you to this standard. I didn't think Buddhists got angry. I'm like, no, we do. We do. We're trying not to act on it.
Absolutely. You'll see contention even amongst various different sects of Buddhism, where someone may have grown up Buddhist and they see us and we eat meat. And like,
that's a great point.
That doesn't mean you're not a Buddhist then. I'm like, well, we're Shin Buddhists. So that is not outside of the realm of acceptability for our particular faith.
That is actually a great point, because I think the term we often talk, or I've heard over and over again, 84,000 paths to enlightenment, kind of implying that, you get on one of them, but there's that many, it's a big number.
Right.
Find your path.
And we're not, and I try to tell people, it's not that we're trying to discover enlightenment or that we're trying to somehow manifest enlightenment into existence. It's already there, and we're merely attempting to find it and see it and live it. Which sometimes you'll have flashes of enlightenment, and that might be the best that anyone can hope for. But my usual description of it is, enlightenment is right outside the house, and if you could just look out the window, you'd see it. But you've had your eyes shut your entire life, and maybe you've taken a little peek, but whether it's through fear or the ego acting as a wall, it's very, very difficult to actually see out. And when you do, maybe you're just peeking through a crack. And if that crack is there, it means you're making progress towards something. And that's sometimes all we can ask for.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's such a unique perspective. It's almost flipping the rest of Buddhism on its opposite head, because there it's about self-power, it's about rigorous mental discipline, it's about, and to your point, I heard it said very similarly, like there's enlightenment as a Shin Buddhist is a gift, and all I have to do is pull the bow and open it up. It's just right there, but that's easier said than not even that. That's one of the so there's a lot of, your stories is very interesting, how you got here. You had a family that kind of put you on the path that you're young, and your wife pretty much, serve it up, and give you a great experience. And that's something we always want to hear from Sangha members is what keeps you coming back.
Well, the Sangha itself was a family beyond anything I had. I mean, my in-laws live here, and they've been extremely supportive and wonderful in our lives, but I couldn't talk to them about Buddhism as much. So finding like-minded individuals, all from different walks of life, brought together is just the perfect allegory for what Buddhism is attempting to define. It's that we're all part of one thing, and we're just trying to remember that.
Yeah.
We're not separate. Only our ego makes us feel like islands, like we're locked away forever alone in life and in death. And hopefully through the Dharma, that's demystified, and we realize, no, we're all in this together. We could be different religions, we could be in different countries, but we are all trying to find that love and compassion that is the center of everyone.
Yeah.
We may be down many layers deep, but we can always find it if we look.
I think that's a really interesting point. Learning from other religions. You put priests on pedestals. You put the word of your God or leader, on a pedestal. But we're baked into ours is the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Like they're sort of all equal. And to your point about what keeps you coming back is the Sangha. And have the Sangha even helped you learn and helped give you insight into?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They've helped focus me, and I hope that I've offered tidbits of information to make them think about stuff in a certain way they haven't. The study group and the Dharma discussions were great for that.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just in passing. Sometimes it's just talking to someone you normally would never have run into naturally, but we're here together and we're all walking a similar path. They're all different paths, of course, as you stated, but we are all looking for something. So if any of us can offer something, then it brings you back because you say, hey, I had this great conversation And I really want to continue that.
Uh,
And that conversation could last decades. So,
I think that's fascinating. I find sometimes sharing Buddhism or my own thoughts about Buddhism teaches me more than I think the person I'm sharing it with sometimes. In terms of how you have to gather your thoughts and express yourself, you end up reaching some kind of new
right.
insight or something. That's fascinating.
Absolutely. It's kind of like how psychoanalysis works.
Yeah.
They ask the questions that you need to ask yourself. It's not you're actually helping yourself in a sense. So Buddhism could do that.
Mm-hmm. So, what advice would you offer someone who's curious about Buddhism, or even considered coming to a service or visiting the temple?
Well, there's so much online at this point, especially during a pandemic, that you can have a very low pressure introduction by simply watching one of the services through the online medium. I, of course, want everyone to actually experience and live it here in person and feel the sounds and the sights, and when we can return to lighting the incense, the smells that just bring it all into a cohesive feeling. But reading about it can be daunting because there has been a very large westernization of Buddhism. There's plenty of books on Zen sayings, and it's taken the Buddhism out of Buddhism. It's more like that's the way, that's the living a lifestyle definition. So when people hear about Buddhism, they usually think, "Oh, I should meditate more," or I should study famous Zen sayings and then maybe try to integrate those, but they're not really getting any guidance there. It's kind of separated from them. It's something that they can't really expect to change their perspective.
Interesting.
But the fear for lots of people, especially those who have left another organized religion, is I'm not really ready to walk into another building, be it a temple or a church, because I'm worried that it's going to bring back any angst or pressure or sense of frustration that I may have felt, especially for people who were brought up in their parents' and grandparents' religions and don't really feel like they've had a choice. Both my parents were, my mom was Catholic, my dad was raised Protestant, and they both ran from those religions the moment they left home. And so they didn't impose any specific religion on us, and they let us decide where we wanted to go with it.
Yeah.
So that was a freedom that a lot of people don't necessarily share, but that was what spurred me to look into it.
Yeah.
So for others who are either looking for new guidance, start with simply watching a service or watching any video on Buddhism at all to give you a better definition of what it is and demystify it, and know that our temple specifically accepts everyone as they are. We're not expecting anyone to have advanced knowledge. You don't have to have studied Buddhism at all. You can come here, you can listen, and through the message you will hear that these ideas and thoughts can absolutely apply to your daily life, and you may already be thinking this way, but it gives you a tool in order to formally understand and maybe help you go forward. Because compassion is something we all need, and that's the main tenet of Buddhism, being able to understand your fellow man and be able to offer them the caring you wish to receive in turn. And if that sounds familiar, treat your neighbor as yourself. I mean, all religions have a similar idea because they're all built off of the core understanding that we are all in this together and we need to love and care for each other.
Thank you, Joran, for sharing your experiences with us today. And thanks to our listeners for tuning in. Remember to hit the subscribe button for future episodes. For programs and activities happening in the temple and virtual, visit our website at Ekoji, EKOJI.org.